Howdy team, happy Thursday. Welcome to Elroy. I'm in my truck right now. I'm fixing to walk into my second football game for the night. Before I jumped in there though, I wanted to certainly take the opportunity to talk to you. Guys, the lesson this week is so good. In fact, the way that it's laid out is truly one of the best that they've done with the D6 material. But there's also an element of it that I think is really timely for our church. But it's right there at the end. So please hang with me tonight as we discuss this subject. For starters, let's talk about Uriah. Talking about David and Bathsheba. But we ought to know that Uriah was not just some general warrior. And the lesson brings this up a little bit, but I want to take it a step further. Uriah was known, or was a group that was known as David's mighty men. To kind of put that in a modern day equation, Uriah was a part of special ops. He was a Navy SEAL for David. When there was a particular job that needed to be done, Uriah and his team were some of the ones that were at the very front. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because when David was on that roof and he saw from afar a woman that was bathing, there was lust there. I think he was genuine when he didn't know who that was, but the second she walked into his home, he would have known exactly who she was, because chances are exceptionally good David was at Uriah and Bathsheba's wedding. Think about that. Think about the depth and the breadth of that and how quickly we see David fall. Also, I think it's really good to point out at least 2 or 3 different points. There are people in David's lives who could have spoken up and said, "King, I think you need to stop here." And no one did. And there's multiple reasons why they could have not done that. The biggest is probably the fact that, yes, David's the king and you don't question the king. However, there were people in position that could have questioned David. For instance, especially Joab. Joab, one of David's very best and longest serving friends. When David sent the message, "Hey, Joab, I want you to have Uriah killed," he could have responded with, "Okay, king, I'll do what you want, but why?" And having that simple little checkpoint of accountability may have stopped this crazy train of sin that was going on here. I bring that to say all of us need accountability. This is worth talking to your group about. All of us, regardless of your position in life. Doesn't matter what your title is, how high up the food chain you are, even if you're a pastor. And I don't know if you know this or not, Pastor Eric, who is genuinely one of the most honorable men in the world, he has the pastoral council, which we're voting on right now, as a form of accountability for himself. I think that's a beautiful thing. In fact, all of us on staff have various forms of accountability. That's so important. All of us need that. All of us need someone, even if we're an incredibly honorable human being, just from time to time to stop and say, "Hey, how you doing? I see you making this choice right now. That's a little bit out of character for you. What's going on?" And it might be a perfectly reasonable, honorable decision on their part. But don't just assume because someone has made lots and lots of holy decisions up to the point you're seeing them at, don't just assume it's probably a holy decision as well. It's okay and good and holy and right for us to check on one another and help keep one another accountable. And if we're really holy people, we won't mind that. We'll actually embrace that and see the beauty of that. See, what happened in David's life is sin continued to breed sin. It started at lust, and then it turned into lies, and then it turned into covering things up, and then it turned into murder. God help us, please. Right? Don't ignore little sins in our lives. Speak up, repent, and speak in one another's life. Now, here's the biggest part of the lesson. I think the thing that we want to make sure that we get right. The lesson lands with the death of a baby. And most, if not all of you, should know that we lost a baby in our church a few weeks ago. Pastor Jared and his wife lost a child. This particular concept of just the death of a child for some is going to be very raw. I'll be honest with you guys. It's still raw in my heart. I got to go meet that little girl in the hospital. And I don't even begin to presume, and none of us should, why that little girl, any number of babies die. Pastor Eric reminded me earlier today, 50% of women have experienced a miscarriage. So this is something that's going to touch home for a lot of people, but inevitably, especially you who are teaching kids or you who are teaching students, you may very well experience the question, okay, so when a baby dies, does that mean that mom and dad committed a sin? And the answer to that is no, at least not like David did. In fact, we know of lots and lots of scenarios where adultery has happened and a baby is born and it ends up being a glorious thing. Not the adultery, but the life of that child. But in this particular instance, God did take the life of the child. And the Lord does do that, but he doesn't always do that. Truthfully, guys, if we want to get big and theological, the truth is all of us die as the result of sin. Not necessarily just our specific sins, but just all of us, because sin exists, death exists. That came into the world via Adam and Eve, and it's not going to stop until Jesus comes and sets us free. That's why we love Jesus so much, and that's why we long for his return, so that the pain of death will stop forever. But that's also why we're so grateful that we can have hope in death because of what that means. But as we're discussing this subject, let me please be gentle. It's good to bring these subjects up. I don't think that we ought to avoid this section of the passage just because it's been so soon since an actual death of a baby in our church has occurred. This is all the more reason for us to lean into this situation and be an encouragement to one another. No, little Olive did not die because mom and dad were sinful. Death happens in our world because of sin. But in this particular instance, God took the life of a child. And inevitably, someone in our church building, if not several someones, if they don't actually verbalize it and say this, they're going to think it and they're going to say, that's not fair. And you know what? They're right. It's not fair. But I think that's a really perfect gospel pivot point. And again, please do this carefully. Don't go, booyah, when you make this point. But I think this is a really legitimate point to make. No, it's not fair that the life of an innocent baby died for a sinful person. However, remember that we serve a king who innocently died in our place for us as sinful human beings. And so there is a little picture of Jesus here. And so let us take solace and encouragement in that. Let us war against sin in our lives, because sin does continue to mar the world that we live in. And let us rejoice in the fact that we serve a God who is good and gracious and holy, and he's given us these stories so that we can learn from and be encouraged by. And then let's minister to one another in our pain and in our sorrow. Certainly the Phillips family, but again, lots of us were affected, not only by Olive's death, but just death that's happening all around us. So bless one another this week. Guys, we love y'all. Can't wait to see you. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.